What's going on, everybody? Larry here. I am simply a comedy fan chatting with and interviewing comedians. This is Life Say Bit with Larry Mullins. Today's guest is an incredibly hilarious comedian, and he is also one half of the amazing Are You Garbage podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one, the only, H. Foley. It's a car alarm. I hear that here too.
It's okay. I've tried every. The only problem is my apartment runs all along this street.
Let's see.
Called 911, but they haven't responded.
One thing I can try is when you're not talking, I can hit the mute button on my end.
Okay.
To cover up the sound.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, dude, it's fine. I mean, you know. It's like, come on, dude, where are you sleeping in? Like, do you realize your alarm's going off?
Well, that's the thing that sucks about New York is you might not, like, they might live in an apartment fucking 3 blocks down. You know what I mean? And don't
true.
even hear it. Yeah. But I called the police. They better be here soon. I know they have murders and all that things to deal with, but I'm being inconvenienced here.
No, I mean, I've heard, you know, a little worse than a car alarm in the background before, you know, when I'm. That's so funny. I didn't even think about it. Like, yeah, because you could probably like live somewhere and have to park like 8 blocks away.
There was some lady out there in a robe fucking taking pictures of the car. You could just tell she was waiting for somebody to come by. Is this your car? This is ridiculous.
So you did actually call the police and you're like, hey, there's a car and the alarm's just steadily going off.
I looked up what to do. If a car alarm's going off in New York City, what do you do? I figured you call 311 and it said, no, call 911. So I called 911 and I was like, yo, there's a car alarm going off. Am I at the right spot? Am I calling the right number? I don't want to fucking bother you. She's like, no, she's like, no, you're calling the right spot. And I told her she's like, what's the make and model of the car? And I gave it to her. And she's like, oh, like 10 people have called. She's like, we'll get somebody out there right away.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, it's like, see you in July, fatty. Tough break, buddy.
Well,
so what's going on, bud?
Nothing. Thanks again for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm probably gonna jump around a little bit, but you know, I want to start by saying,
what's the pod about, if you don't mind me asking?
So basically, I've always,
I hope you don't say how the Jews are starting forest fires. I'll have to cut the line real quick.
Or how like the Holocaust isn't real, or no.
Please God, no.
No. So I've always loved watching like stand-up comedy and listening to it, and when like the pandemic hit, like I just kind of got into like podcasts, you know what I mean? And I started discovering. You know, it's crazy because a lot of the comics that I've fallen in love with are all in New York. All of them. Okay. And I just started watching like random podcasts, and I was turned on to Tuesdays with Stories. And that was like a trickle effect, and literally any name they've dropped, I've looked them up and I've fallen in love with them. Aww. And I just randomly came across Are You Garbage one day. Yeah. And I'm like, I love this. Like, it's so funny. Like and I'll ask you about that in a little bit, but like I started watching these podcasts, and like I've always wanted to start one of my own, but I'm like, I didn't know like what I could talk about. Like, I like a lot of things, and like if it's just me rambling about random stuff, that's not gonna be good, and that's not gonna be interesting. So I was like, well, I really love comedy. I was like, I wonder if I could because every podcast I like, it's hosted by comedians, basically. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I could pull this off. Maybe I could try one where just me as a fan, I talk to comedians to kind of get that kind of aspect. And that's just kind of like, well, let me try it. And so far it's been going good. So
there you go.
I mean,
I love it.
And I'm like, well, you know, I'm like, hey, maybe, you know, hopefully I'll get some yeses. So it's been good so far. I mean,
that's awesome. I'm happy to be here, my brother.
Well, thank you. Like I wanted to ask, when exactly did you start doing stand up?
I started in the summer of 2008 in Philadelphia. Yeah.
Philadelphia.
Philly.
That's where you're from, right?
I'm from the suburbs of Philadelphia,
Okay.
but I moved up here in 1999 to New York to pursue an acting career, which turned out to be doing coke in a bar for about 6-7 years, and then I moved back home, and I wanted to actually try to pursue acting, so I went to an open mic one night, thinking, trying to get my legs under me to be in front of people, and it just took, what I mean? I just liked it. I fell in love with it. And I just happened to be coming onto that scene in Philly as like a bunch of really funny people were starting comedy, or like maybe a year or two into comedy. And, a lot of us became really good friends, and most of those people are still working and doing really great things today. So there was a whole little wave we had down there in Philly, and we all stayed down there for about 4 or 5 years, and then we moved up here. So I moved up in 2013 on New Year's Day, 2013, and then Kevin, who I'd been working with in Philly, or best friends. We lived together in Philly for a little while, or I lived in his basement, as he likes to say. He moved up, and a bunch of our friends had moved up or were moving up, and that was it, man. That was it.
It's funny. I've been to Pennsylvania a few times, but I've only actually been in Philadelphia. Like once I ran up the Rocky Stairs and we drove through. I can't remember. It was like Bon Jovi was doing a concert, I guess, in the Eagles Stadium, or
Oh my God.
I can't remember what
How
year.
old were you?
Jesus. I don't know. Probably in my 20s.
Was it the new stadium, the stadium that's there now? Was it nice, or was it shitty?
I didn't go inside. We drove by it. I want to say it was in the.
Oh, you didn't go to the Bon Jovi concert?
No. We just drove by and heard it. We heard it.
Right.
I want to say it was
That's a little less trashy.
I was probably It was probably in the early 2000s.
Okay, yeah, that was a new stadium.
And
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Where are you? Where are you coming at me from?
I'm in Virginia.
Virginia. All right.
Yeah, Virginia. So
That explains the crock pot behind you up on the
yeah,
cabinet.
I knew.
Fair
How
enough.
did I know you were gonna say something about that?
Oh, I've been clocking that place since you came on screen. I see the off-brand Windex behind you, the 80s cabinets. I love it.
Yep.
The apples on the wall. It's good shit. It's my job. What do you want me to do?
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's funny. It's just where I'm at. I was engaged to somebody. It kind of went south, so I'm back home with the family for right now because I don't really have any other choice. And I'm gradually kind of turning my room into a semi-studio. I'm gradually upgrading things, and in this area, this is the kitchen. There's a lot of natural light here, so I'm like, this works.
It's great. It looks great.
Dude,
I got to be honest with you, man. If I could, whether I was a billionaire or had no money, I think if it was up to me, I would move home and live with my parents. Because they're great. I love them. And during the pandemic, there was nothing going on. So we were up here for the first 2 or 3 months and grinded it out. But then when it started to get nice outside, in May, we were like, fuck this. Why don't we go down and we'll stay at my parents for, the beginning of the spring and the summer. And it was unbelievable. So the burbs are clean living, baby.
Yeah, it's
Does your mom cook?
Yeah.
So you got dinner every night and all that stuff?
Yeah, but I mean, I'll be like, hey, you want to order something? I'll pay for it. You know what I mean? I'm not like,
no,
hey,
let her cook.
Hey, cook.
She wants to.
Hey, cook dinner every night. But no, I'm always, and it's I'm comfortable here, and I'm always worried that when I meet a new lady or something, I'm always hesitant to be like, yeah, I live at home, and because some people honestly judge that and others don't. I mean,
did you move there? Was this during the pandemic or is this before the pandemic?
This was before.
All right. Well, you got the best cover in the world. If
And
anybody asks, all you got to say is, hey, the pandemic, my parents needed help. And you know what I mean? They're really living with me, to be honest with you. I'm not really living with them. I pay the mortgage. No one's going to question that.
I'm not quick enough to say anything like that. When you were mentioning, you said you moved there to pursue an acting career.
Yeah.
I wanted to say I saw those. What are those We Don't Know videos?
Yeah, well, that's all. This was before
that.
Yeah, this is before I started comedy. This was literally from 1999 to 2008. I was living up here. I moved up here. My brother was working on Wall Street. You know, I flunked out of college and I went to theater school for 2 years, and then I lived in North Carolina for a year because there was a movie studio down there that I thought I'd be able to work at, which wasn't the case. So all my training was when I was younger, as far as that stuff's concerned, but I didn't start applying any of it until literally 2016 when we were up here for 3 years. And Kevin was like, dude, you should, you know, why we're doing this, trying to figure out how to become stand-ups and, you know, doing spots in the Village every night. And, you know, barking and hosting and open mics. He's like, you should really, you know, pursue that. So I did. So I started going out on you know, submitting myself for like short film auditions, like, you know, like student films and all that shit.
Yeah.
I was able to build up a little bit of a reel. I got linked up with a manager who started sending me out. And, you know, luckily I've been working as an actor somewhat steadily since 2016. And the We Don't Know was a project that Irene Morales, who's a fellow comedian, and I came up with and executed, you know, just to really do it. You know what I mean? I thought it would be a cool little thing.
I think I want to say, like, you look good in front of the camera. Like, it looks like you were meant to do that. You know, like they're really well produced. Like, I watched all of them this morning.
Thank you.
And I never even realized. I was like, oh, what's this? I was like, oh, these look cool.
Yeah. We thought it was a pretty cool idea. We had a guy named Tyler William Milliron who owns Milliron Studios. He's like an everyman, unbelievably talented guy. And, you know, we got together with him, we pitched the ideas, and we produced it together. And it was supposed to be just, you know, little vignettes of, like, you know, the things of a couple you don't get to see, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate that.
No problem. Yeah, I wanted to talk, like, the Are You Garbage podcast, like the idea and the concept behind that. Like, did you guys come up with that together? Because I just think that's the most original idea. And
yeah.
like, I cry at some of the questions, you know, and at least I'm starting off like, were you originally doing it? Was it like a Gas Digital thing? Because were you at that studio originally?
No. So,
or
Kevin and I have been working together since we almost both of us started comedy. Him, Tom Cassidy, Chris Cotton, and I, we all ran a show together in Philly. You know, we started making sketches together and stuff like that. We all came up here together. And then when we got up here, Kevin and I started a podcast called Center City Comedy with Reggie Conquest and Tom Cassidy. And then after that, we did one called Hard Feelings, which we now do on the Patreon, patreon.com/Are You Garbage, where it's just me and Kevin shitting on each other. So from like driving to gigs, and Kevin and I are both from similar backgrounds. All right. We're both from the same kind of area outside of the suburbs of Philly. Our families are a little bit similar. You know, we're cut from the same piece of trash. So we used to shit on each other, you know, in the car rides, be like, you know, like things we did when we were a kid, or like things our parents did, like me having, you know, the above ground, in ground pool, or having milk for dinner. And we would say, oh, that's garbage, or that's garbage, or that's garbage, or you do this, that's garbage, this is garbage. And then, you know, we kind of did that for a while. And then towards the end of the run of our original podcast, the Center City Comedy Show, I had this idea to like do it as like a game. You know what I mean? Like, it was, you know, very unrefined. So I talked to Kevin about it, and then we came up with the idea to, like, you know, make it Are You Garbage? So we did it with Tom Cassidy and Derek Gaines and our buddy Andrew Chavone, who we were all on the podcast together with at the time, and we were fucking dying. Like, we were dying laughing, just laughing at each other. You know, like the first thing I asked Andrew Chavone, the first question was, what was the name of the grocery store that you went to when you were a kid? And it was like Magoobers or something like that. So we just all started fucking dying laughing.
Some random grocery store.
Yeah, just some shitty, you know, hole in the wall. So, and then Kevin and I, you know, both developed the idea and all that stuff. And then one day we were both had a spot at New York Comedy Club. And we were both, I guess, over that week kind of thinking the same thing of like, what's the next idea? What are we going to do? What's the next move? And we walked into each other and I said, hey, I think I have a good idea. And he goes, hey, I think I have a good idea. And we were like, let's do Are You Garbage as a podcast and have comedians on and we'll interview them about how they grew up. And then, we just developed a show from there. We started doing it just before the pandemic. We're coming up on our year anniversary, I think at the end of this month. We rented a studio, just like a podcast rental studio called Gotham Studios. We started doing it there, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And when the pandemic hit, all these bigger comics were available because they weren't doing. Nobody was doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And when the pandemic hit, Kevin and I were both like, "All right, we can either check the fuck out, or we can actually." Try to, salvage something out of this. So we started doing 2 Are You Garbages a week over Zoom, and we started doing a Hard Feelings every day. So we were just like, we're gonna really try to fucking do something here, and we were able to get some great guests on, and it just started to snowball from there. And then I was a buddy of mine, Tommy Pope, was doing Real Ass Podcast. And he's like, do you want to come in with me and do it? And I'd known Lewis a little bit, wasn't really that close to him. And he brought us in and we had a great time. I was telling Lewis, we're doing the plugs. He's like, what are you working on? I was like, oh, we have this podcast called Are You Garbage? And, he took a shine to it and then he did it. And we had such a great time. And then eventually they signed us and we started doing it there in Gas Digital. And, it just really started to take off. They were absolutely amazing. It's a fantastic network. And then, it kind of got to a point where, we always had this long-term vision of it, like, having like a set in the studio and all that stuff. And then, we got a place in the city and, built Antooties and that was it. It's been going real strong. The response has been amazing. Everybody that's come on it has been absolutely amazing. And they've been, really great at, co-signing us or talking us up or whatever. Everyone seems to have a great time. And it's really been resonating with a lot of people out there because no matter whether you're rich or poor or, whatever nationality or race or creed that you grew up, everybody has some kind of garbage in them or recognizes that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. 100%.
My favorite episodes are when we get people that aren't garbage, which is very few and far between. But when you have somebody that when somebody despises me or looks at me and is like, ugh, you're disgusting. Like, that's what I like. You know what I mean? So there's really something for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that was just a podcast studio originally because I've seen other podcasts it might be in the same studio that they're renting space at. I've seen before, it looked familiar.
Well, we only did 3 episodes at Gotham, I think, or 3 or 4 or 5. But if you're talking about the Gas Digital studio, the one, I don't know what episode you're talking about, but we were in Gas Digital's main studio for a long time, or for 4 or 5 months while we were signed to the network. But Lewis does this podcast out of there.
Okay, then that's probably one of the episodes I watched.
Yeah, there's so many great podcasts that come out of that network. So,
and then I can't remember the first one I saw with the new was it Antooties? Is that what you call it?
Antootie. Shout out to Brian Six.
I love that setup.
Thank you, man.
I love like where it's like the wood panel walls and the
we wanted to make it look like the basement of like your parents or your aunt's house where you went down and smoked weed or drank beers or shot the shit or played video games, when you were in high school and shit like that.
It nailed it. I mean, I just I'm looking at like the Cheez-Its and the bottle of Mountain Dew and I'm like, oh my God, that's me.
I love the Cheez-Its.
Yeah, I don't drink Mountain Dew as much anymore, but I mean, in the cabinet we have like
you can't. It's like doing blow. You got to stop at some point and grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, you get your hands on a Code Red. Good night. Good stuff.
Yeah, like we have these older cabinets. These like the vintage, the clear blue like Pepsi cups.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love like anything vintage like that, like the old school like Pizza Hut type cups, like the clear. You know which ones I'm talking about, like the reddish ones and.
Absolutely, all that stuff, man. For me, it's really a way of, I'm a very emotional person. I'm a very nostalgic person. And, I feel like, I was very lucky growing up. Like, we weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination. We were, lower middle class, kind of a, blue collar household. My mom worked as a dental assistant and then managed the dental office. And my father was, was a recruiter in the Navy. But we were just real lucky, how we grew up and where we grew up. And it was, it's something that we think should be celebrated. You know what I mean? Whether it's running through the sprinkler, having an above ground pool, fucking, this, that, and the other thing. It's great.
Yeah.
A lot of people can relate to it.
And I can relate to you a lot too, because I'm pretty much the same growing up. Like, it was always like, really, it was always lower middle class. My needs were always met. Not because I'm like a kid. I mean, I was spoiled, but it's not like. And then I remember the first time when I came in contact with somebody that was like wealthy and stuff, I was just kind of like, oh, I'm not used to this. Like the first time I just met somebody, I'm like, that must be nice. You know what I mean? But it's like, we were never poor. Like you said, lower middle class. Like, we have everything we need. Yeah. And it's just, I had an uncle that had an above ground pool, I mean, so like every time I watch you guys' podcast or listen to it, because sometimes if I'm just in the car, I like to just listen, but I prefer to watch it because I like watching the facial reactions and everything. It's got a more personal feeling, in my opinion.
Sure. The one cool thing that we started to notice, and Andrew Shultz, who's been a guest on it and been a great advocate of ours, absolutely fantastic. He kind of was like, you're humanizing comedians, which is really cool. But there's always this point in the podcast where all of a sudden it clicks in the guest's head. They're like, oh, okay. Because they go back to something that they hadn't thought of in fucking 20 or 30 years. You know what I mean? On our regular podcast, some of these things, they wouldn't come up. But because of the way we designed it, the way the questions are, it's, we're triggering things in your past and your memory, which is really cool. So kind of exactly what you're talking about.
So like, and now you get, do you get all the questions from your patrons, or do you and Kevin come up with a lot of the questions yourself?
Of course. No, all the questions come from us. What we started doing is we wanted to, build kind of a little universe. Yeah. So we want to be able to bring guests back. You know what I mean? Because you don't really get to everything in that hour. So one of the things that when you sign up for our Patreon, you automatically will get one of your questions read on air at some point. So what we decided to do is have guests come back, and instead of us really asking the questions, we read off Patreon questions. And it's funny, there's a lot of linear thinking. Like sometimes they'll ask a question that we've already asked, or we'll maybe start using a question that they had. You know what I mean? That was really good. Like the other day, somebody asked us, somebody said, is it garbage that I still shit blood a year after doing a hot pepper eating contest? And I remember I was like, that has to be a fucking question. Have you ever done any kind of food competition? It's beautiful.
It makes sense.
There's a lot of that.
It makes sense if I pay attention, because I remember basically what you're saying is like when you initially have a comic on, like I remember an example, like Mark Norman's first episode, and then his most recent one, it was all Patreon questions.
I mean, for the most part,
I get what you're saying. So when they return,
we'll throw a couple of ours in there. It's all to like trigger stories and just get like the ball rolling and stuff like that.
I think like, I'm like, how do they come up with these questions? They're so hilarious. Well, and every time I watch one, I'm like, I ask myself the same question. I'm like, yep, I've done that. Yeah,
the thing that we found is, the ventures that we've taken before, like the other podcasts, this is the most us. Like, this is something that Kevin and I just do naturally. We'll judge something, we'll be judgmental. Oh, that's trash or that's garbage. And it's a constant thing. It's just, it's where we're just living it. Like the questions just are always, there's new questions just always coming up. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just think of something, boom, put it in the phone. Think of something, boom, put it in the phone.
And you can tell that it's just natural. I mean, you can tell that if I could just tell the first time I watch it, I'm like, okay, these guys have been friends forever. Like, it's just natural. You can tell.
These guys are trash.
But do you know what I mean though? Like I can tell. It's just so natural. Yeah. I think that's why it's so good, and so entertaining.
Yeah, we work well together. He hates me, and he should.
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
like, and like when I started this, and it's like it's a way for me to get to know. It's a way for me to get to know people too, you know.
It's
And
great, dude. It's so great, man. And like, like somebody like, Mark will bring some of his fans over and then they'll like us, but every once in a while we'll have somebody on that maybe people didn't know, and then they fall in love with them. You know what I mean? And,
yeah,
like I said, it really endears you to comedians because you think, why this guy is getting on stage or why this girl is getting on stage and saying these things, or, what caused you to pursue something like stand-up comedy, and then you see their background, and it makes sense. You know what I mean?
yeah, and
it's
it's
great.
and I was so hesitant too because I'm always like second guessing myself. I'm very insecure when it comes to certain things, and I'm like,
Buddy, I'm the most insecure, low self-esteem guy you'll ever meet. Trust me.
and I'm like, normally these comics go on, podcasts and talk to other comics. I'm like, are they being willing to just come on and talk to like a normie? Just like a fan of the stuff, And then
like look at Norman. Norman does everything, man. The guy says, he does so many great things. He's such a hard worker. He puts himself out there, to everyone, because I think you never know what anybody's going to become, and you never know what's going to be big. So we were always taught that, like, don't be snubbing people, and you know what I mean? Be gracious and say yes when you can. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. And never worry about a no. If somebody doesn't get back to you, or whatever, just keep it moving.
Yeah, I've learned to stop really taking stuff personally.
I'm working on it, but
and I understand, I understand some people are just busy.
Yeah, and busy. Some people, like, we've had a couple of no's with some people we've reached out to on the podcast, and some people it's not their cup of tea. Some people, some comics don't talk about themselves really on stage. It's more observational or, just more jokey joke. And, some of them, they might have like a really fucked up past. We keep it very lighthearted. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? We're not trying to find out, if your uncle molested you or something like that. We don't want to fucking pry into your personal life like that unless you want to talk about it, unless you're at, at a place.
Yeah, they might be like, I don't really know if I want to go there.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you could, you have to understand that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's crazy. I was like, before we get back to you, but like we're kind of on the topic, like I've had Mark on and had him on fairly early, and like it's just crazy because it's like I discovered him this year, and I went to see him live. I had the chance to meet him.
Killer. He's a killer.
It took and he was as down to earth as I thought he would be. And
he's great.
And I remember I was like, well, there's probably never going to be a really right time to ask him. Let me just ask him because I know he checks all of his messages. It just happened, and I was like, oh my God,
He's done like 1 million podcasts over the pandemic,
and I read
he doesn't stop working.
And I read in a Facebook group, somebody's like, I'm gonna start a podcast just so I can talk to him because he says yes to everything. But no,
He's
like
great.
I'm just like, I was being realistic. I'm like, I'm going to get no's. And I haven't actually got a no yet, but I've had a few instances where the message has been read, but I haven't got a reply.
Sure, yeah, you're going to get that.
And
it's
I had one,
game. Just keep moving on.
And I had one that was like, I'm a bit podcasted out. Maybe we can do it down the line. I'm like, okay, I respect that. I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. I understand. Thanks for replying to me.
Sure. It's always nice to get a response. I take it a little personally when you don't get a response from somebody, but yeah, you just got to shake it off and keep it moving.
Yeah. I initially was like that. I saw a scene and I was like, but no reply. Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that's kind of,
you just get the heart, you get the like. It's like, what? A like is like a fuck you these days.
Yeah. And then it's a lot of, cause I imagine like, for example, because you and Kevin are comics, like, a lot of other comics, so it could be maybe a little easier to get in touch with some people.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like with me, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've been lucky like through Instagram so far, but I'm just like, I'm like, I don't know if I should, I'm like, maybe they might be like, hey, talk to my manager, email my manager, I never know what to do. I guess it depends. I haven't like tried to like,
keep grinding away at it, baby. You're doing great.
Yeah, I haven't tried to like, contact anybody super huge. And then, like, so my friend was like, well, Mark, I was like, he does everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, they helped me put it together. They're like, yeah, but he still did yours.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great.
And now what episode was it? I can't remember. I think you and Kevin said it on, I want to say, was it I think it may have been on Joe List's most recent one, but you said when Andrew Shultz, he gave you guys like a shout out, and that kind of helped give you a bump, and that helped. Because your podcast, like, I mean, it's getting like really popular fairly quick. I mean, you said you just started it right before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, thank you. It's growing really fast, and we're very grateful for that. And yeah, we were. I think I want to say. I think Joe List was the first one to shout us out. He shouted us out on Tuesdays with Stories, which got Mark to do it. And then we had Shultz on, and then Shultz eventually had us on his podcast, which was amazing. Lewis shouting us out and exposing us to his audience was a big thing. So it is just kind of like, those steps involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I imagine it's not, word of mouth is good too. Like,
yeah,
I'm always
is good.
And I'm always like, somebody asks me, hey, I'm looking for some new podcasts to check out. I'm just like, all right, boom, 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 boom,
Mm-hmm.
and it's and like yours is one where I don't care who the guest is, I'll watch it regardless.
Thank you.
And I'll listen
That's
to it regardless, just because I love the premise of it. It's just so original, and and I'm like, this has got to be boring. It's just basic interviews, but it's kind of like a get to know you kind of thing, and it's like I kind of like discovering, like, I don't know if you want to call them mid-level comics, but not like superstars,
No,
but
I
kind
know
of
exactly
like
what you're talking about. And there's so many great comics out there. There's so many great comics that with the industry being the way it is, that have to do things on their own. So it takes a little bit longer for them to, get out into the general public. Like, I'm unknown, completely unknown. And this has given me an avenue to reach out to, a little bit of an audience and a bigger audience. And there's a shitload of great comics in New York, man. And, the one thing that I'm grateful that, we were able to make something happen during the pandemic, but like at New York Comedy Club on a Saturday night, and it was fucking lights out with just all New York comics just up there killing it. So there's really a plethora of talent out there that, the general population doesn't know about yet. You know what I mean? But they're coming. It just takes a little bit longer because, a lot of people have to do it on their own now.
And I think a lot of the main reason that for like 90% of my guests have been New York comedians is because I've word of mouth from another New York comic, and everybody I've talked to that's been from New York has been incredibly down to earth, easygoing. And I'm like, man, I should just move to New York. Like,
the city humbles you, man. So, you learn pretty quick to be grateful for, what you have and who you're around and all that stuff. So,
yeah, I'm like,
that makes sense.
I and I'm not like judging, but I just feel like, yeah, those West Coast people kind of have like a certain attitude to them. And
I've never been out there, but any of the LA comics that we've had on the show have been absolutely fantastic.
Oh, I'm willing to bet, but I just know from experience, like everyone that I've talked to has, like I said, primarily been in New York, and that makes me just like love New York comics because I haven't not liked anyone from New York, and I'm not just saying that. Like,
no, I hear you.
And they're like, wait, so like, are you in New York? I'm like, no. And they're like, but almost everybody you talk to is in New York, and that's just how it's ended up.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
stuff. It's good. It's a good place.
I'm like, I'm in Virginia, and I'm like, I'm in Virginia, and they're like, oh, Virginia, but
it's good except for the car alarm that's been going off for the last hour.
I'm about like 30 minutes south of DC.
Nice.
So I mean, probably like Pennsylvania. I can probably get there in like 3 hours.
There you go.
And I wanted to ask you, about, and I'm hoping to make it up there sometime. What was it like doing the gig at Soul Joel's? I'm always seeing pictures and videos. I'm like, I have to get up there because it just looks so much fun.
Dude, that guy is he's really kicking ass, man. It's great to see him getting his due. I remember hearing about Soul Joel when I was still in Philly. I think I auditioned for something that he was putting together, some kind of comedy competition or something like that. I didn't get it, but he's been grinding away, doing his own thing. And then, with the pandemic, there was nowhere for people to go. The guy started doing an outside series in the summer that was absolutely fantastic. All these big comics went out there. The people came, they sat out there in their beach chairs and all that kind of stuff, and supported comedy and got great shows. And now, we were lucky enough to do it. Kevin and I co-headlined there. I want to say in December, I think, and it was right before he put up the dome. And it was probably like 35 degrees the night we were there, but he had the heaters set up. We had about 70 people or 50 people there, and they were just absolutely fantastic. And he was fantastic. And, the openers were fantastic. He's creating like a really cool thing. And now with the dome, it's like a special thing. It's really unbelievable. So Joel's a great guy, and he's really doing cool stuff down there.
So I'm gonna have to get up there because every time I see pictures, I'm like, man.
Yeah,
like,
if you're hearing this and you're near Royersford, PA, go see a show at Soul Joel's, man. You'll have a good time. And also, too, Emilio Savone, who owns New York Comedy Club, he's another guy that's been doing absolutely great things, just making things work during the pandemic. They're doing a bunch of shows up in Fairfield, Connecticut. And, we do penthouse rooftop shows here in New York every weekend. You know what I mean? The pandemic has really separated people from who really wants it and who really doesn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I've just from everybody I follow, and I wanted to ask you too, like when I see like comics like up there on the roof, like they want it, you know what I mean? They're like, I gotta keep working. Or at least I've learned that just from talking to other comics. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
And that makes me respect them even more, because I know some just are like, well, I'm just not gonna work because stuff's closed down. Like, oh, I'm not gonna do that.
I mean, if you can afford that, that's great. But most of us can't. And there's some people that want to do it, but just maybe weren't working in the clubs or whatever yet. But I've been saying this since the beginning of the pandemic, because I remember in the summer and in the fall, you would hear about these open mics that young comics set up in like Washington Square Park, or like, this park or that park, or under this tree or next to this mailbox. And I really think that those comics are going to be really, really special, because if you're fucking going out and doing it outside with no microphone in the summer or in the winter with either no air conditioning or no heat, you want it. You know what I mean? So I think there's going to be a real special group coming out of it.
Yeah, the first time I saw like some footage on Instagram, like it was literally, I think it was put on by, Stand Up in New York or Stand Up New York. It was literally in a park. There was no microphones. They're just standing by a tree, just basically practically having to like project their voice. I'm like, this is so insane, but it's so awesome watching this.
Yeah, the one thing about that I noticed pretty quickly is, I primarily host a lot, okay? And, New York Comedy Club has become like my home club, and they've been unbelievably great to me, for having me. And to be able to continue that has been amazing during the pandemic. But the one thing that I've noticed is that, obviously on a Friday night or Saturday night, when you have a packed show and everyone's in there and the energy and the low ceilings, you're projecting a certain way. But, when you're in front of a tree or on a rooftop or something like that, you really have to change how how you're delivering it. And I feel like, for me, it's been a good lesson as far as like being more conversational, or, addressing, maybe it's 3 people, maybe it's 4 people, maybe it's 20 people, you know what I mean? And really, just adjusting your levels to the situation. Being in the moment, I guess, is the best thing. That's one thing that doing stand-up during a global pandemic has taught me, is being in the moment.
So
I think it's helped me as a comic.
So going back to that, Derek, are you able to do gigs like fairly often, like with the outdoor setup, or does the podcast take up like most of your time, or do you try to like do your best to balance it, or
No,
maybe a dumb question, but I
not at
mean,
all, not at all. We do everything. You know, we do everything as hard as we can do it. And like I said, I've been very, very, very fortunate that what New York Comedy Club did. You know, they had like three or four different locations. You know, outside, socially distanced, safe locations where comics were able to perform on a pretty regular basis throughout the entire thing. So, you know what I mean? I've been able to get up and do spots pretty regularly, which I'm extremely grateful for.
that's good.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't even know, like where I don't even like where I live. Like, I mean, I know there's the DC Improv. I think they occasionally do something outside, but I went to, at the end of, I want to say July or August was it? I went to this place called the Arlington Draft House.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw Mark there, and it was indoors. That's where I met him, and it was socially distanced, and I mean, it was done pretty responsibly. I mean, they have like they had groups of chairs separated by tables that were blocked off, but it was still nice though. But like just watching, like I specifically want to go to New York, and I want to go to one of those rooftop gigs, or because they just look so fucking cool, and like
Yeah, they're
I'm
cool.
like,
And the audiences have been for the most part really, really cool, and people seem to be very appreciative. And you know, there is a slight sense that we're all in this together in those moments, which is nice.
that's awesome. So the New York Comedy Club, the big ones now. Now you said they do. Jesus, I may have a stuttering problem. No,
Okay.
but
An eating problem.
yeah, they're one of the main comedy clubs that started doing like the outdoor thing. They're
Yeah.
like one of like the big,
Yeah.
like, so a lot of the outdoor gigs are, I guess, what would you say, hosted by them or set up by them?
I mean, you know, they have their own things. They had, like I said, they had 3 or 4 locations that they were bouncing around through the summer, the fall, and the winter, and you know, now we're coming into the spring. You know, just to try to, you know, keep everything moving forward. You know what I mean? I know it's not lucrative for them by any stretch of the imagination. They're really doing it, you know, for the community. You know, to keep comics, you know, performing as much as possible, and you know, try to entertain people throughout this whole thing, which is a really great thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's almost like a tragedy. Like I've been to Newark once, and my cousin and I, and this could be garbage in itself. We took the mega bus up there.
Buddy, I've taken that a million times.
And I was like, wait, I'm like, it's
It's
only
very
20. I'm like, it's
garbage.
only $20.
Yeah.
So we bought like
Until you
tickets
get
and
on it, then you realize you're like, fuck, this is $20.
yeah, we left like really early because like the hub, the closest hub, whatever you want to call it, to Virginia, it's in DC. And we left like really early. And I want to say we got to the city probably around 11 a.m. And the weather was horrible. Like it was cold and like it had just started like raining. We had to go buy umbrellas. They ended up breaking. I wish I could tell you the exact intersection we were at, but we had to go into this gigantic Apple store in the city and like kind of take refuge. And I'm like, man, this is horrible. Like we were trying to walk to see like the 9/11 memorial and all this stuff. And the weather was horrible.
Yeah, it'll get you.
And we just went to like, I don't know, 3 or 4 different pizza places and had a slice from each and then went home.
That's so trashy. That's great.
I mean, it's just like, that's, I want to go back when it's like nicer weather, like kind of like in the spring, summertime.
It'll be back, baby. New York's not going anywhere. It'll be back. You can't kill this place. It can kill you, but you can't kill this place.
And going back to Are You Garbage? Like, because the Patreon, you do a special Patreon only episode. Do you do that once a week in addition to the regular one?
Right. So we do 2 episodes a week that get released to everybody. And, you know, we have our own YouTube page, the Are You Garbage YouTube page. And we do a weekly bonus Are You Garbage, and we do a weekly bonus Hard Feelings on our Patreon. And we have the 3 tiers. We have a $5, $10, a $20 level. And for the $20 level, we do once a month, we do a live Zoom with the $20 members. And, we usually play a fun game where, where we come up with 10 yes or no questions. And if whoever has the most yeses, they win a free hoodie. And then we let them ask us questions. And it's a really fun time.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So that's the $20 tier?
That's the $20 tier, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome that you guys are like growing, that you guys are growing so fast. Like,
yeah.
Is there a specific just random question? Is there a specific day you guys try to record every week, or do you do all of that the same day, like the different, or do you kind of spread it out?
We try to do 2 episodes a day. On Tuesdays and Thursdays are usually the days that we record. Mm-hmm. We're just starting to get into that schedule now. For the first couple, month or so that we were in the new studio, it was a little hectic. We were scrambling. We were trying to get this, we were trying to get that, just to try to get it off the ground. But now we're slowly starting to get into a groove where we usually record one outgoing episode and one bonus episode on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay, so for before we wrap up, for when you have like gigs and stuff, do you normally post that stuff on your Instagram? Do you have an actual website, or?
I do, but I don't know. The website has who's going to anybody's website? Is anybody doing that?
Yeah, everybody's posting stuff on Instagram and like social media and all that.
Yeah, our biggest, way of, reaching our audience is our podcast itself. Yeah. So, we're hoping to do some things pretty soon. Once, things open back up, that'll all be on the podcast and it'll be all over our social media and all that stuff.
Cool. And,
yeah.
So for those listening that don't know, your social media is what? Foleygrams on Instagram?
Foleygrams on Instagram and @HFoley on Ice on Twitter. And you have the Are You Garbage Instagram, patreon.com/RUGarbage. Right now, I don't know when this is coming out, but for the
next Friday, the 12th.
Great. So for the next 7 weeks or so, Kevin and I are on the Stereo app every Thursday night at 9:00, where you can, where we're talking back and forth, and you can leave a message right there live. It's free to sign up, and we're having a fun time with that.
I've seen a few podcasts that are starting to implement that.
Yeah, it's great, man. It's
been what's really this? Fun.
Yeah, it's a fun way to interact with the audience right there on the spot. So it's been cool.
Well, man, I a pleasure meeting you. Thank you again so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
It was fun, and I hope the police come and
They just pulled up, man. They're right outside.
Oh, they did?
The boys are here. Someone's about to get their fucking battery line cut.
Like I said, you can hear it, but it's really not that bad. Like, I can hear it, but It's not like it's blaring.
As long as it didn't drive you crazy, I appreciate it. Thank you to you and your audience, and check out Are You Garbage, man.
Yes, check out Are You Garbage. Thanks again so much.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Boom.
That concludes this week's episode of Life's a Bit with Larry Mullins. Please follow the pod on all social media at Life's a Bit Pod. If you are listening, please follow, rate, subscribe, and write a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell your friends. While you're at it, please follow H. Foley on IG at Foleygrams, and get him on Twitter at Foley on Ice. And last but not least, please check out the Are You Garbage podcast. It's available wherever you get your favorite pods. Again, thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next one.